The sound of heavy steps from the other recruits began to be heard. Some of them tried to break it up, but Jungkook and Jimin were too focused on their fight. The slippery mud added to the challenge, making their movements miss at times and further muddying the waters. "That's enough." The voice of one of the recruits, Taeyong, rang out in the distance. He tried to pull Jungkook's shoulder, but Jungkook kept going, throwing punches that this time landed on Jimin's arm. However, something happened. After the punch, Jungkook paused for a moment, his breath catching. Underneath his frustration, he realized one thing. Jimin wasn't striking back. "Why are you silent? Come on, fight me," shouted Jungkook in a weakened tone. Jimin, with a slightly bruised face, stood up slowly. He rubbed the corner of his bleeding lip with the back of his hand. Instead of attacking, Jimin smiled a small, though tired, smile. "I fought you because I was upset. But now I realize, there's no point," Jimin said in a low but firm voice. "We're just making ourselves look stupid in front of everyone." Those words stopped Jungkook in his tracks. His anger slowly subsided, replaced by embarrassment. He turned his head, and for the first time, he noticed their peers standing around, watching the fight with shocked and disappointed expressions. Just then, a loud whistle broke the silence. The captain came with heavy steps, his face full of anger. "You two, come forward," he ordered in a cold tone. Jungkook and Jimin stood with their heads bowed. The mud clinging to their bodies was a silent witness to the commotion that had just taken place. "You think this is a playground? This is a military camp. A place where you learn discipline and cooperation, not a place to solve problems in this primitive way," the captain scolded. Jungkook and Jimin could only remain silent, holding back their embarrassment. They knew there was no reason to justify their actions. "Since you've chosen to fight, you'll settle it in the boxing ring tonight, by the rules. And after that, you will have extra duty for the whole week. Is that clear?" "Clear, Captain," they replied almost simultaneously. Though their voices sounded sluggish, the other recruits tried to break it up, but the two men were too strong. Finally, the sound of a loud whistle broke the commotion. The captain came in with an angry face. "What the hell is this? You guys think this is the place to fight like little kids?" The captain snapped. Jungkook and Jimin stood panting, their clothes wet and dirty with mud. They were silent, neither daring to answer. "If you have a problem, solve it at the boxing arena tonight, not on the practice field." The captain instructed them to fight under supervision, according to the rules. That night, all the recruits gathered around the boxing ring. Jungkook and Jimin, boxing gloves in hand, stared at each other. The fight was fierce. Jungkook, with incredible strength and stamina, threw punch after punch. But Jimin, known for his agility, dodged most of the attacks while looking for an opening to strike back. By the last round, they were both exhausted. But strangely, in the middle of the fight, they began to chuckle. Jungkook fell because he lost his balance, not because of a punch. Jimin, instead of attacking, helped Jungkook up. "It's funny that we got into this over a flag," Jimin said with a tired smile. Jungkook laughed. "I guess I'm too stubborn." The fight ended without a winner, but from that night on, they became close friends. Their rivalry turned into mutual support, making them both stronger. At the end of the training, both Jungkook and Jimin were honored by the captain. They proved that cooperation is more important than personal ambition. Jungkook and Jimin, two new recruits, are both known for their physical abilities and prowess in the notoriously harsh military camp. Despite coming from different backgrounds, they have one thing in common: the ambition to be the best. However, this commonality puts them at odds. The military camp was located in a cold mountainous area. Every day they had to undergo strenuous physical training, such as rock climbing, crawling under barbed wire, and running 10 kilometers with weights on their backs. Jungkook was often the first to finish the task, but Jimin was never far behind. On a wet morning after a night of heavy rain, they were gathered for a war simulation. The captain led the briefing in a stern tone. "You must work together as a team, but remember, this is also an individual test. "Whoever performs the best will be rewarded with special honors," he said. Those words fired everyone up, especially Jungkook and Jimin. The simulation began. Jungkook, who has incredible agility, immediately took over the front position of his team. He moved quickly, taking the flag, which was the first target. However, Jimin was not to be outdone. In one of the challenges, they had to cross a rope bridge over a small river. Jungkook made it across the bridge first, but when it was Jimin's turn, the rope wobbled a little. "Slow down, Jimin!" exclaimed Jungkook, half-mockingly. Jimin, already annoyed with Jungkook's superior attitude, replied, "I don't need your advice." The tension began to build. The climax came when they reached the end point of the simulation, where there was only one flag left. Jungkook and Jimin arrived almost simultaneously. Jungkook reached for the flag first, but Jimin pulled him back. "Don't be selfish, it's a team effort," snapped Jimin. "If you're fast enough, you get it," retorted Jungkook sharply. Unknowingly, they began to push each other in the middle of the muddy simulation area. The tension that had been pent up finally exploded. Jungkook, with his larger physique and undoubted strength, pushed Jimin so hard that his body fell to the wet ground. The sound of splashing mud mixed with Jimin's gasping breaths. He stared at Jungkook with eyes burning with emotion. However, Jimin was not one to give up easily. The resentment and prestige bubbling in his chest made him rise quickly. "You think you can win with just your muscles?" exclaimed Jimin, in a challenging tone. Without thinking, Jimin threw a fist at Jungkook. Jungkook, not expecting the attack, staggered back slightly as the punch landed on his shoulder. But he didn't stay still. With the reflexes of a fighter, Jungkook immediately stepped forward and countered with a harder thrust, knocking Jimin off balance again. "I told you, I don't like smartass," snapped Jungkook as he clenched his fists. Jimin winced, but his eyes showed no sign of letting up. He jumped forward and threw another punch, this time more aimed at Jungkook's face. However, Jungkook managed to dodge nimbly. The attack brought them closer together until they were staring at each other with anger. "If you want to prove something, prove it on the battlefield, not by hitting," growled Jungkook. "And you think you're in the right here?" Jimin replied in a sharp tone. The fight turned even more chaotic. They pulled and pushed each other until they both fell to the ground. Jungkook, who had more strength, managed to rotate his position so that he was on top of Jimin, holding his partner's hands. But Jimin, with his agility and intelligence, seized the moment to break free. He elbowed Jungkook in the stomach, making him groan in pain and roll to the side.